Well, good evening, everybody. It's just clicked over to 7, I think, and just in being mindful of time, making sure there is some time at the end for some Q&A. We'll sort of get started, and I'm sure people will join us as we get going along. So, welcome everybody. My name is Sarah. I'm from Refresh Renovations. Really great to have you join us this evening. This is the ninth in our webinar series, so it's a monthly webinar series that we run. We're aiming for half an hour tonight, so 30 minutes. And tonight's topic is how to renovate for maximum value in 2026. So I'm going to be joined tonight with Sam, and he's going to lead us through, but I'll just go through what we're actually going to cover in detail. So the content tonight will be what value means into 2026, the do's and don'ts, things to consider, what buyers are paying for, how to avoid waste spend. We're going to look at three really interesting case studies, some real examples. We're going to look at three rules of return on investment. And then, as I said, we're going to have some Q&A at the end. So please feel free to get some questions. You can pop them in the chat as we go along, and then Sam will answer them at the end. So I'm just going to hand over to Sam. Off you go, Sam.
Good evening. Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. So I'll start by talking about property in 2026. So the market today is very different to what it was a few years ago. Buyers nowadays are more cautious, they're more selective, and generally less willing to take on work themselves by way of managing renovations themselves. That means there's a clear shift toward move-in ready homes, as in properties that feel finished, functional, and pose a low risk. So if you are renovating with value extraction or return on investment in mind, the goal is no longer just to improve a property, it's to remove friction for the buyer who would be taking that on. So when we talk about value, we're not just talking about aesthetics anymore. Value is really a combination of three things as shown in that equation. It's function, it's efficiency, and usability. So asking questions such as how well does the space work? How much will it cost to run? And how easy is it for someone to live in immediately? Are questions that are valid at an early stage. And for example, in many cases, layout now matters more than raw square footage, meaning an optimized layout for a lesser area can be preferred over a dysfunctional flow of space spread over a larger area. I would note that the use of the term buyer in this context refers to the party purchasing or renting the property from the homeowner carrying out the works, which would then consequently allow for the realization of said return on investment or added value. The buyer's checklist here is a useful way to think about what's going through a buyer's mind. And what they're usually looking for is a property that's ready to live in, that would be energy efficient and flexible enough to suit modern life, whether that's working from home or for family use. They also would want to avoid future costs. So anything that signals, oh, this needs work, can eventually reduce the perceived value very quickly and serve as a deterrent. So as quoted on that slide there, if your renovation aligns with this checklist, then you are on the right track. So what should you be doing in this market? And now we're going to be looking at the do's and don'ts in the forms of recommendations or the pitfalls on the other end. First, focus on adding usable space. That would be space that genuinely improves how the home functions. Kitchens and bathrooms remain key value drivers, but they need to be done properly. That means not just the aesthetic aspect of the kitchens and bathrooms, but the utilities such as plumbing and electrics and the waterproofing beyond what meets the eye, because this is usually what sets up a bathroom or kitchen for success or failure. Energy efficiency is also becoming increasingly important. And Storage is something buyers consistently look for. So making sure everything is compliant and well documented does then remove the perceived and actual risk for buyers during the acquisition process. Um, because usually you've got issues that arise on documentation, and that typically happens in terms of um, the acquisition process during conveyancing. If certain documents are missing, then indemnity insurances would be required, or so on and so forth. Things that usually complicate that process and then lead to negotiating points that end up discounting the selling price. So these are key areas where buyers consistently place values. On the flip side, there are some clear mistakes to avoid, such as overspecifying beyond your area. That is a big one, um, which means spending more than the market will return. On every street or every postcode, there will be a ceiling price based on that history. So that is an element to be taken into consideration to make sure that the renovation plans and the budget that accompanies that does not exceed that ceiling price. Another mistake would be removing bedrooms to create larger spaces. This can backfire because bedroom count is critical for value. And then following short-term trends is a risky thing to do, and ignoring layout functionality can undermine an otherwise good renovation. Last but not least, cutting corners on visible quality is something that buyers notice immediately. And that is one of the reasons why now almost each or every listing that comes to the market, the seller is then advised by the agent to do some work on the finishing so that it sells quicker, because it's that consistency that matters throughout the property. So what's changed in terms of design preferences? One of the biggest shifts that we've seen into this year is a move away from the wow factor design. Buyers are placing less emphasis on bold statement interiors and more on usability and comfort. We're also seeing some fatigue around overly open plan layouts and a move towards warmer, more character-led spaces that have functional zones. So the design direction is becoming more balanced and practical. And more on that design segment, some of these design principles remain consistent. On the left-hand side of the divider, we see timeless design elements such as neutral tones, quality and durable materials, and clearly defined or zoned spaces that continue to appeal to the widest range of buyers. Whereas on the other hand, what's starting to fall out of favor are completely or overly open layouts, or overly bold and ultra specific themes, cheaper modern finishes, and heavily trend driven interiors. So the key here is to aim for broad long-term appeal rather than something highly specific, as that is what will then play into maximum added value and a higher return on investment. So just for a few more seconds here, these are mood boards of different colors that could be considered under the timeless design umbrella. Here with the crittle and some of the brushed brass fittings, this is where you can find workable trends that still fit within what is usually appreciated and found acceptable by, again, the or appealing to the widest range of buyers. Moving onwards, here we look at the high value upgrades. So these are the types of upgrades buyers are actively willing to pay more for. And they come in the form of adding an extra bedroom, which can significantly increase value. Second bathrooms or en suites are highly desirable. There's an element of privacy that goes into that, whereby there isn't any other bathroom in a property. Having built-in storage is often underestimated, but is very impactful where free space throughout a property is not abundant. And then high utility kitchen diner layouts that still maintain some zoning work very well. And lastly, consistency in the finishes throughout also make a big difference. Energy efficiency is now firmly part of that value equation, as we saw previously, because buyers are thinking beyond the purchase price. They're considering ongoing running costs. So upgrades like insulation, higher spec windows, and efficient heating systems aren't just nice to have. They're becoming an expectation in the market. When we talk about insulation, talking about having insulated floors, walls, and ceilings. When we talk about windows, it's about having double glazing as a standard. And then if taking that further, that can be triple glazed with different add-on features that can improve efficiency. And third, when we look at efficient heating systems, we can be considering air source heat pumps, which run on electricity and reduce reliance on gas. So for those who are not familiar with air source heat pumps, what they are basically heating systems that extract heat from the outside air and transfer it into the home. Again, it runs on electricity, not gas. They're being adopted because they are 3 to 4 times more efficient than traditional electric heating. They can reduce carbon emissions by up to 70% compared to gas boilers. And they have strong government incentives, such as the boiler upgrade scheme, with also easement on planning rules started in 2025 to allow for more projects to adopt these systems. And then just to give that some credibility with market performance, there was around 125,000 units sold in the UK in 2025, as they are the most common low carbon heating upgrade in London homes. And then lastly, looking at underfloor heating as a heating option, which is being increasingly considered in ground floor renovations, extensions, as it improves efficiency compared to traditional radiators. And that's especially if it's coupled with a heat pump. So I brought forward this case study because it also had energy efficiency factored into it. This was a ground floor maisonette in SW16, and that's in Streatham. As you'll see here, basically, these were the existing plans. So the scope for this project was minor internal remodeling with rewiring and replumbing, and then refreshing all the interiors of the property. So what we're going to be looking at here in those photos during where the pointer is, that is the floor build up here that had floating timber joists. So prior to stripping out, that had no insulation whatsoever, and because this property is taking a air source heat pump, then all of that needs to be properly addressed, properly insulated, so that we can insulate that space properly to result in a high rating EPC. So that's the process of starting to insulate it, fitting in the insulation boards, taping them to make sure there's no gaps, and then here laying the overlay boards for a plumbed underfloor heating system. So all these loops have pipes going through them that would basically move the hot water around. And then this was another space. So this space was in the bedroom, which is top left where my cursor is now. And then this space here where you've got what looks like rubble, which would be then compacted, is in here between the utility and new bathroom. So this was then compacted, insulated. It's a different type of build-up compared to the floating floor, albeit doing what's necessary to reach that same end result. So here we're going to be looking at the before image from the bathroom. So it was a derelict maisonette that hadn't been renovated for approximately 45, 50 years. And that was then transformed into a larger bathroom with large fixtures that cater for the client's needs. So everything here, for example, in terms of design aesthetic was befitting of a modern bathroom finish, with most of all of the fixtures being wall hung to provide that that seamless modern finish. And here we look at the kitchen before the renovation, and that's after it was renovated here. With basically a note here on that buffer zone between the kitchen and bathroom, which serves as a utility room, that took the setup for the heating system that was basically connected to the external unit, which is the air source heat pump. And this is where everything would be centralized to then heat the property. If we then move on to best value add projects, looking at projects that consistently deliver strong returns, a few of those categories stand out. Where applicable, it's loft conversions, extensions, to be specific, rear extensions, and layout reconfigurations. They're all very effective. As we've mentioned previously, kitchens and bathrooms as high usage and intimate spaces also remain key. But we have to emphasize that it's about how well they're executed. Before moving on, a key point here that's worth mentioning is that usually lofts are often the quickest way to add bedrooms or office space under permitted development in London. They add on average 25 to 30% more usable space to your home. And the reason it's quicker, for example, than an extension, because in most cases, the existing boundaries of property would support that extra weight imposed by the loft structure. Whereas if you're doing an extension, you have to do new foundations and so on and so forth. A crucial element to achieve return on investment is avoiding waste. And most renovation budgets are lost in three main ways. The first would be overcapitalizing as a most common issue. This is where the total spend exceeds what the local market will recognize. So here, a simple question to ask would be, as a project is considered, is that, will a buyer actually pay more for this? And this would be the consideration of what's being planned and added in terms of value to the renovation. If the answer isn't clear, then it's worth reconsidering or double checking just to make sure that it would be heading in the right direction. Number two would be invisible spend. This is where the budget is allocated to things that don't translate into perceived value. So that could be over engineering behind the walls, or premium upgrades that aren't visible or meaningful to the buyer. So that doesn't necessarily mean that these things have no value, but they rarely deliver the return because they are not seen, they are underappreciated. And the third would be poor planning. And this is where the costs can escalate very quickly. If the work isn't properly sequenced, you often end up doing things twice, and that means delays. Delays mean increase in labor costs, and then unclear scope leads to budget overruns. So this is where a structured approach to a renovation makes a significant difference. So now we're moving into the second case study, and here we're demonstrating case studies on projects with the best return on investment. So here we're looking at a property in Elmbank Way, and that's postcode W7. the scope of this project was the internal remodeling of a kitchen and dining space. So my cursor here is pointing on the existing ground floor layout. And part of the issue for the client, the owner, or the issues that were faced living in this property was that the very narrow kitchen space and an okay-sized reception room that didn't allow basically for a flow of space that would suit their lifestyle. So having gone through the process, it was then designed at concept level to look at, okay, how that space can be reimagined in terms of opening up just enough to have these areas zoned in a way whereby the functionality of it would meet what the client was looking for and deliver on that specifically. So we'll look at some of the before and after images there. So that was the dining room as was shown on the floor plan. This was the divider wall showing the division between the kitchen and the dining room. As you'll be able to note here that each of those rooms had access to the rear, and the flow in itself wasn't very friendly to their lifestyle. So that was then reimagined for a larger kitchen, one open plan space with an L-shaped kitchen and an island, which also still allowed for a sizable dining room that would suit them, closing up the door that was in place from the kitchen side, and then having a door to the garden, sliding doors there in that occasion or on that occasion. Next slide. So this was during the build of that same project. So part of the scope was to remove that chimney breast to make more room for that kitchen. And then this is where the divider wall was removed. And these are the spaces that were blocked up. More on here to show you the progression of it through the different stages. So that's the new window with the right support. And then a bit more here to show you again how it is really important for the floor to be insulated so that you don't have cold air coming into the house from underneath, because that is one of the elements that really affects energy efficiency, and doing that throughout the property can boost your energy performance certificate rating by a lot. And then laying the floor in herringbone pattern there with the final photos on the finished products. And the third and final case study is again on Avenue Roads, SW16. The scope here entailed a complete overhaul of the property and some add-ons. So we're looking at a loft conversion, a rear extension, a new outbuilding, and a full internal remodeling of the property. What that was going to achieve was adding a master suite at loft level. So that's a bedroom with its own ensuite, upgrading and modernizing the interiors, increase in habitable space, and having a dedicated multi-purpose worker play space, which will be in the outbuilding at the rear of the property, as shown in the proposed view here on the left, bottom left picture. Okay, so going into that, we're looking at progress photographs of the picture. So this is where the rear extension will be. These are photos. This small photo is a grab from the existing state of the property before the work started, and this shows the new walls for the extension as they were being built. And then the next one similarly shows the the outbuilding in the rear from the perspective of at the rear of the property, looking back towards the end of the garden. And here we're looking at the new staircase that is going into the loft conversion. And on the bottom left, we're looking at a ground floor section render that shows the desired end state of the property. So that's the extension bit where the kitchen and dining space will be. And then that's the outbuilding, which will have again, a desk and lounging area or a reading space. That is the outbuilding as shown, and that's the reference to what the client would like it to be in its final state. So following on from the slide on avoiding waste, most renovation issues come down to few predictable factors. It's poor planning, it's unclear budgets, a lack of defined scope, and too many parties involved without clear accountability. And then these are all avoidable with the right structure. And it's equally important to mention at this stage here that these elements, if not basically gotten right, they could cause a loss of an average of 30% of the project's budget. And that's where the refresh process was born. So as a design and build company delivering end-to-end renovation projects, our 5-step process was created with a focus on managing the entire process from concept through to completion with clear pricing and structured delivery. So it shows you here the typical home renovation journey from step 1 all the way to step 5. Structure and clarity provided by such a process will protect your budget and help get the best outcome, because clarity is needed from the start. What it delivers basically is a clear scope, a defined budget strategy, a strong project management effort, and then a single point of contact, which results in mitigated risk, controlled costs, and helps keep the project delivery on track and to the required standards. So if we were to take away 3 things from today, it would be those 3. Number 1 is to think like a buyer, not a homeowner, when making those decisions, especially if your focus is on return on investment. The second would be to prioritize function. Finishings will eventually follow. And the third is to spend where the value is measurable. These 3 principles will guide most smart renovation decisions. And I hope that information is useful to everyone attending today. Back over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sam. That was really interesting. Some great advice there. I can't see any questions in the chat, but is there anybody who's on with us at the moment who would have a question that they'd like to unmute themselves and ask Sam? Great, Dennis. Please, yeah, just unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. So I'd like to ask, in which cities do you have branch, or in which cities you make these buildings and renovations?
So we've got, I think, roughly, and I can be corrected later on by sharing with you the website, we've got around 20 locations across the UK. So what we can do basically is share with you the website for locations, and you can see what's the closest to you. Otherwise,
Okay.
if you tell us where you are, then we can recommend the right location so they can reach out to you and discuss your project if you'd like to do so.
I'm looking for Newcastle, Derby, and Manchester, and Doncaster.
Okay.
And also one more question. Can you foresee the potential new valuation of the property before you making those renovations? So roughly, can we say when it is modernized, the value, new value will be X amount?
So that can be done in collaboration with the local experts, who usually are basically the go-to, let's say, agents to selling those properties. What we can do, though, is as part of planning that renovation effort, once you go through that process, you've got your plans, you've got your costings, you know how much everything's going to cost. That, in addition to the current price of your property and then the advice from the local agents, will then form a very clear picture on what to expect,
Yes, but I'll be
especially
a
when
deal.
considering the timing factor of when potentially that property would be sold.
Yes, definitely, but I'll be a deal sourcer, so I have to roughly calculate the cost of the refurbishment and the end value. So in
Mhm.
order me to do it, this is the reason why if we can have any estimation for the end value, that would be very nice. Otherwise, I don't know what to do.
Yes, no, there are ways. There's not one set way. There are multiple ways to do so, but it's all specific to your circumstance. As you say, you're a property sourcer, so there will be certain considerations to to be factored in to be able to reach that point, because that still is valuation. It's not a 100% level accuracy science. So
Yeah,
there,
roughly.
yeah, yeah, that can be done. That can be done.
Okay, you can give a roughly valuation, not valuation, but the yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah, valuation.
Yeah, the specifics of those would have to be, of course, discussed with you, but that is something that is doable and has been done before.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Right, we had one question in the chat there. It says, how do running costs typically reduce after renovation? And do we have any real examples or percentages of savings? I didn't know if you had anything offhand, Sam, or something we could send perhaps.
So I know there's some materials that we can send. I don't have anything specific on the top of my mind as to how that compares, and I wouldn't want to mislead. But when it comes to the running costs, it will all depend on, again, the type of system that currently exists and the one that's planned to be in use. And that's basically one of the ways to figuring out whether this will be worthwhile for any property at hand. Is that transformation from, for example, if they've got an electric setup, or if they've got a hybrid between electric and gas, towards a proposed setup, whether it's solely an air source heat pump or another hybrid. So we need to basically make a comparison of existing and proposed, so that you'd look at how much specifically that property could end up saving in terms of running costs. But we can look at average figures that we can share in terms of materials. And if there is interest in, diving deeper into that side, then we can certainly prepare a webinar that tackles this area specifically.
Great. I hope that at least answers the question in part there. I can't see any more. So if there's any more, please unmute yourself and ask the question while Sam is here. Otherwise, I will be sending a recording to everybody of this webinar, so you will have an opportunity to revisit it. And as I say, this is part of a monthly webinar series. So if there are, like Sam says, if there are topics that you're particularly interested in that maybe we've touched on tonight, but you'd like it developed in more detail, then please do let us know. Reply to the email that I'll send out to you shortly. And then we'll certainly look at all different topics. We're keen to do things that are of value to people. So I can't see any questions, so we'll close now. So thank you, Sam.